we turn it around?
You see on the bottom of the screen, there's like the button to like turn it.
Yeah.
Can you see it? Okay. You turn it 2 ways. Okay,
yeah,
we can see you. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you hear
sorry
me?
about that. We're a bit behind the times here in the UK. On yeah. We're not quite at your level, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
here I am. Yeah.
It's fine, no problem, don't worry. So let me just introduce you. So we are right now live with Roger Hallam. He's the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, the civil disobedience movement, which is using non-violent methods to urge governments to act to stop the climate breakdown, the mass extinction, and minimize the risk of social collapse. Recently, he just wrote down a book which has been called in Italian "Altrimenti siamo fottuti," which means otherwise we are fucked up. And yeah, we are really glad to have you here, and we are going to spend almost 1 hour and talking just about that. So yeah, Roger, you are studying a PhD on civil disobedience, weren't you?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. We've got an hour, have we?
Yeah.
Right.
And
I have to think of lots of things to say.
Yeah, it's just fine. There is a book of 80 pages, so there are a lot of things to say. We are just trying to dense it in a few points. So could you tell us about what were you doing before Extinction Rebellion?
Well, I'm an organic farmer in Wales. That's where I am at the moment. So I grow organic vegetables. Did that for 20 years before I went to King's College in London, and then I was doing research on civil disobedience and how to mobilize people and all that sort of stuff. But I've sort of been involved in various sorts of activism since I was about 14, dare I say it. So I was really busy as a teenager. I used to be like, doing my schoolwork, and then the rest of the time I was in the peace movement, going on demonstrations, sitting on the road, going to prison, all that sort of thing. So I sort of like I was causing trouble at a very young age. So not that I'm So that's me really. I've been doing this sort of thing most of my life.
That's great. And did you have a turning point in your life in which you realized that the struggle for, I guess, the climate breakdown was what we had to do right now?
Yeah, well, the situation is, as you can imagine, if you're a farmer, well, particularly if you grow vegetables, you grow crops. What you spend half your time doing is like looking at the sky and going, okay, so what the weather's going to do. So the weather is like, it's an absolutely central part of your life. And, this is the case for, 1 or 2 billion people around the planet who are involved in growing food, right? There's hundreds of millions of people. I mean, there's not many people, let's say in the Western world, but, in the global South and what have you, there's tens, hundreds of millions of people who get up in the morning going, okay, so what's the weather going to be like, right? It's not just it's not just a sort of amusement, right? Basically, if you're going to feed your family, if you're going to pay your bills, if you're going to supply your customers, all the rest of it, all depends upon the weather. You can be as good a farmer as you like. It can be super great. You can work 70 hours a week like I used to do. But if the weather's shit, you're fucked, right? You've got no money. And the situation is, I was quite good at business. I had about 20 odd people working on growing the vegetables. And I think in 2005, 2006, something like that, it rained every day for 7 weeks. And I lost every single vegetable that I grew that year outside. It all rotted away because, it hasn't rained every day for 7 weeks. This was in the summer. It started on the 2nd of June. So, that's like a 1 in 1,000 year event, whatever, it's just not supposed to happen. So that totally terrified me. It totally destroyed my business. I spent 5 years trying to get out the debts that I accumulated that year. And then since then, it's just been some endless shit show, basically. You know, like every year there's some extreme weather event. I mean, this is the same in Italy, isn't it? You've had like
Yeah,
drought, you've had like
particularly.
ridiculous amounts of rain. So you're basically on the front line. This is a, you know, it's a frontline community thing if you're on a farm. Even if you're well off, basically it just stresses you out of your head, right? Because as a farmer said to me, like, you know, I might as well take my money and go to Swansea Casino. So Swansea's like the nearest city to me. And it's
Hmm.
like, you might as well just go and put your money down, right? And lose it or win it, because you just don't know what's going to be happening. You know, like 2 years ago, it was the warmest summer ever.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't rain for 12 weeks in the summer. Like, you know, like trees were dying. You know, I mean, Wales is a wet place, right? It's supposed to rain. But, and then this year it rained all winter, and then we had the hottest May ever. Like nothing was growing, you know, all the soil was rock hard. So this has been the story for getting on for 15 years in the UK.
Okay.
And obviously, again, you know, it's the same everywhere, same in Italy. So if you're a farmer, it's like hitting you in the face, you know,
Yeah,
every day.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
like some abstract thing.
Yeah, particularly in Italy, in the south, there are a lot of people who are strictly dependent on the weather and the results of the farming, and or they are already like paying the direct consequences, but this is still nothing comparing to what we are going to face in a few decades if we are not going to take action, radical action right now. So in your book, you starting saying that the first step to do, even for activists, is to accept the truth. And it's not just accepting the data, but it's also accepting the truth from an emotional standpoint. What do you mean by that? How is like accepting the truth from an
Well,
emotional point of view?
well, I'm sure you know the sort of thing I mean is you talk to a lot of people, right? And you tell
Mm-hmm.
them we're fucked, and they just go, oh yeah. And then they just walk away, right?
Yeah.
And what's really terrifying is the more important the person, the richer they are, and the more power they have, the more sort of psychotic they are, right? I mean, I was on a show, basically like a podcast with Cambridge University Union, right, which is the oldest debating society in the
Mm-hmm.
world. You know, Cambridge University is a really posh place. And there were three guys on there, and you know, you probably seen my videos, or you haven't seen my videos, you know the sort of way I talk about it. I don't beat around the bush. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying we're heading towards 5 degrees centigrade. That's the new stuff that's coming out of the independent institutes. That's 10 degrees inland. It's 20 degrees higher on a hot day. Basically means mass starvation. You know, that's what's coming down the road for your generation. That's the way it is, right? And like, if
Yeah.
you're a normal person, like, it hits you in the stomach, right? You're just going, fuck, you know? It's just, there's no words to express how you feel about it, right? But when you
Mm-hmm.
talk to these like elite people, you know, I said that in the debate, you can look it up, you know, Cambridge University debate. Well, it wasn't a debate, it was a podcast, right, or something
Mm-hmm.
anyway. But the upshot of it is they just carried on. They just carried on talking about the science, talking about why, you know, you can just use these reformist methods of, you know, contacting your representatives in parliament and changing, you know, a little bit of a subsidy here and there, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
basically these people don't give a shit, right? That's the bottom line. They don't give a shit about your generation. They don't really, they, it's not like they're bad. It's more that they're zombies, right? They
Yeah.
just can't understand because they can't emotionally connect with the reality. And one of the things about people in power, and I'm not being like ideological here, right? It's not like I hate people in power or anything, but you know, I'm just a poor organic farmer. And I was like, when I went down to London, and because I'm sort of semi-famous, I get to talk to these people, you know, the editor of The Guardian, or, you know, some mayor, you know, who's running a city or something. And I go and talk to those people, and they're all like, they're all really controlled. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe it's a British thing, I don't know, but you know, it's like,
Well,
okay, so, you know, they don't get emotional. Well, if you go and talk to young people, or if you go and talk to mothers, you know, you go to a normal English town, and you stand up and you say, basically, this thing's coming down the line, right? It's physics, it's set. There's going to be mass starvation. There's going to be massive temperature increases. There's going to be economic collapse. This is what your kids and your grandchildren are going to be experiencing. This is what you're going to be experiencing. Then people are in tears, right? Because they're human, and that's the first step on understanding the truth, right? It's not some mathematical cognitive thing, right? It's about your relationships with other people. You see what I mean? So you know, if you haven't stayed up all night or started crying about it, you're not even in the ballpark of being able to do anything about it. And again, you know, I'm not saying this because I'm trying to be unpleasant, right? I'm just saying that's what you need to do. People need to get upset.
Yeah, it's important to get emotionally connected to the reality, to the truth. And once we do it, once we reach this point, there have been a remarkable increase in consciousness also in my generation about the reality, about the truth. Do you suggest a plan to action, which is a pretty radical plan to implement a change? And you compare the reformist to the revolutionary approach, and do you say that the reformist approach is just based on political ideology? It does not represent the situation as it is, and you claim more for support for a revolutionary approach. Could you explain us the difference and what does it mean in practice?
Yeah, let me say just before I go on to that, when you tell people the truth, right, and they get emotional, a lot of people in the climate change movements were going like, we can't be honest with people, we can't tell people the truth because it depresses them, right, and they stop like doing anything, right? But what Extinction Rebellion was the biggest influencer on the climate last year, according to surveys and things, right? And the big thing that Extinction Rebellion has done is to tell people they're fucked, right, in an emotional, down-to-earth, ordinary street language way. And that does get people really emotional. And they will get depressed, right? You know, it's just human. People go into despair, they go into depression. But if they have a pathway to action, in other words, if there's something they can do, that means moving their bodies, right? If you can go on something, do civil disobedience, go on a demonstration, then that act of bodily movement, the actual act of doing something, like actually gets you into a better mental frame of mind, and it empowers you. So that's the critical thing here.
Like you overcome the feel of disempowering.
Yeah, how people get empowered isn't by talking on social media, right? No disrespect to this Instagram, right? Obviously, talking is important, right? It's important to know what's going on. But the next step, and it needs to be quite well organized, like at the end of this call, you need to have something for people to do, right? Because they're going to hear me and they're just going to get depressed because I've got a really, visceral, like terrifying message. This is the way it is. But if people go and do something, then they're going to be like loads more mentally happy, right? I mean, there's so much mental illness among young people. And the reason there's mental illness among young people is there aren't clear pathways to actually change the world, right? Which brings me on to your question, which is, okay, so everything's fucked, we're going to die of starvation. These terrible things are going to happen. There's going to be social collapse. It's going to be a complete fuck up, right? What do we do? So the big thing that I'm arguing in my book is it's a no-brainer what we need to do, which is not what we've been doing for 30 years, right? So what people have been doing for 30 years, and there's been a 60% increase in carbon emissions, so it's been a catastrophic failure. What we don't need to be doing is writing letters, going to talk to politicians, getting patted on the head, having photo opportunities, sending delegations, going to conferences, right? You can do a little bit of that. I know Greta does it. I think that's cool. But like, that's not what's going to save your generation, right? What's going to save your generation is economic disruption. Economic disruption is what changes societies when people get serious about what they want to see changed, right? So Extinction Rebellion is basically learned from the guys in the global south, you know, in poorer countries. In poorer countries, people get shot, they're getting raped, they're getting imprisoned, they're getting tortured. People make the decision to go to the centers of cities and close down the government. And that's the quickest and most effective way of getting structural change, right? So I give you a little example of this. It's in the civil rights movement, and everyone on your call needs to watch this video, right? It's on YouTube. Watch this video. You're going to love it. It's called the Children's March. And I think it's 1963, 1961. It's the civil rights movement. Yeah, all the adults are going, no, 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 we don't want to do civil disobedience. We're going to lose our jobs, you know, blah, 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 right? This DJ says, you know, fuck that. I'm going to get the kids out. And they have this like D-Day. All the kids get out of the school. They all go to the center of the city, you know, all these black kids. They're all having a great time, having a party, all the rest of it. They go out onto the street. There's these fascist police people. They get banged up into these big poachers. They get sent off to prison, and they're in prison. And on the first day, 1,000 kids, like 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, you know, 18-year-olds, they're all banged up in prison. There's 1,000 of them in prison, right? So do you know what happens on the second day? On the second day, like loads of other kids go, fuck that, we're going to go down to Birmingham, Alabama ourselves. They get on vehicles, they go down there. On the second day, there's 3,000 kids in prison, right? And then it goes on day after day. But after 7 days, there's all these kids in prison, and they're taking their toothbrushes, you know, to make sure they brush their teeth. They've got their songs, you know. It's just like, you know, it's what it is, right? It's shit, but it's also good. And they go, like, at the 7th day, if you watch the video, there's this, like, sort of fascist police guy, you know, he's basically saying, the fear has gone, right? The fear has gone. Like, that has to be, like, the slogan of your generation, in my opinion, right? Is when the fear goes, you go out into the street and you cause havoc, right? Non-violently, and there's various ways of doing that. We can talk about it, right? But the upshot of it is after 7 days, like 70, 80 years of segregation, it collapses, right? And they change the laws. Now, obviously, like, that's not the end of racism. I'm not pretending it is. But the point is you can transform a society in 10 days, right? It's been done lots of times. You can make a regime fundamentally change its policies, you know, insulate all the houses, bring in electrification, you know, stop funding the fossil fuel industry, you know, give subsidies for green transition, right? Everyone knows what's going to happen, what needs to happen, but they're not going to do it unless there's thousands of kids like getting arrested, going to prison, and all the rest of it. And that's, you know, don't get me wrong, right? I'm not trying to pressurize anyone. I'm not trying to, like, you know, put some big deal on people, right? The people watching this program, this Instagram, you need to decide what you want to do, right? It's your life. All I'm saying, you know, as a social scientist, as an activist, as a designer of political change, is there's nothing else in the ballpark apart from mass civil resistance. And every young person that does it is worth 1,000 old people, right? You know, if I go to prison or I get arrested, no one gives a shit, right? It's just some bod from Wales, right? If a whole load of kids go and do it, it's like wham bang, you'll be on the global news, right? So, you know, there's different ways of doing it. We'll talk about that.
Yep.
And what I'm saying in the book, yeah, just to end, what I'm saying in the book is nothing's going to happen unless everything happens. And again, I'm not saying that because I'm some mad revolutionary or anything. Basically, we're so deep in the shit that everything's going to have to change. The whole political institutions are going to have to change. The whole economy is going to have to change. So all the guys that have been doing reformist stuff, by reformist, I mean, let's go to Rome and, you know, ask for a little bit of a surcharge on diesel, right? That's not going to do it, right? What you need to go to Rome and do is say, we're over shit. We need a national citizens assembly. We need to bring all the Italians together, all the ordinary Italians, you know, a randomized selection of people, and they have the legal right to decide whether Italy is going to exist in 30 years. Do you know what I mean? Because after all, it's their country, right? That's a revolutionary demand, because what revolution basically means You know, it's not just a slogan, it means a fundamental change in the structure of power in society. And that's what we need if we're going to have any chance at all of dealing with it, because we're so far down the road, as we all know.
Yeah, this citizen assemblies looks like really a revolution idea, like to distribute power. But you just told us that we need to put economic disruption in order to achieve something. But you are mentioning going to the capital city instead of going, for example, to coal plants and shut them down. Would it not be more disruptive to go directly to the coal plants, for example? Why are you suggesting to go to the capital city?
Because when you realize that basically the problem is the system, then the particular bits of the system that are really shit aren't your main focus anymore. The main focus has to be the Italian government, right? Because the Italian government has the power to legislate, to tame the companies and tell them what to do. At the end of the day, they have the monopoly of force. Like, that's what the state does. So when political movements become serious about transforming society, they don't focus on companies, they focus on the state, right? You know, in the global south, when people get shot and tortured and all the rest of it, they don't go to the police stations, right? I mean, they might go there initially. They basically go to the center of the city, like Tahrir Square in 2012, because there's a political maturity. This is a political maturity issue, right? Is realizing nothing's going to change until everything changes. That's like that's the political reason. But there's also a pragmatic reason, which is if you're in some, you know, small suburb of southern Italy, right? You know, some province, no one's really going to give a shit about you, right? What's going to get you on the headlines of the Italian press is when 2,000 kids sit down in the center of Rome, or sit down in the center of Rome and Milan and Naples, right? Why is that? First of all, because when you disrupt the public, in other words, once you disrupt society, then people become interested because people become emotional, right? If it's some coal plant, who cares, right? If you're actually stopping people from getting to work, you know, in the morning, people are going to get angry, and that's good because that starts creating a national debate on what it means to be an Italian at this time in history. Do you see what I mean? So that's the first thing. The second thing is the media is based in the main cities. You know, it's based in the capital cities or the main cities. So with it, the media are going to watch you, a lot more likely to come and cover you if you're actually in those cities. And most importantly, that's where the elites are, right? That's where the decision makers are. If the MPs can't get to work in the morning, you can be absolutely sure they're going to be as mad as hell. And that's what you want them to be, because they're not going to change until they become mad as hell. You see what I mean? They're not going to change by you writing letters to them or going to conferences. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm being spiteful or nasty or revolutionary or whatever. I'm just saying it from a social scientific point of view, that no one changes until they get emotional. You see what I mean? And we all know that in our personal lives, right? You know, everyone does shit things, you know, you do something crap and someone tells you off, you get emotional and then you change, right? It's not rocket science. But if someone just asks you nicely that you're doing something crap, you're probably going to carry on doing it, you know? So, you know, that's the theory of change here. And, you know, there's variations on the theme. It's not like I'm saying never go to a coal plant, right? It's more like what's the central focus of a mass mobilization? You know, the center of the mass mobilization shouldn't be coal plants. It shouldn't be schools, right? It has to be, again, doing the school thing is great. Everyone knows that's great. But if you're going to actually create political change, i.e. if you're actually still going to be alive in 40 years' time or whatever it is, then you have to go to the capital city, or you have to create this disruption. You have to sit in the road, basically. You know, that's the main routine, or go and throw paint over a building, or whatever it is. It has to be full on. You know, it has to be non-violent, but it has to be full on, and it has to be respectful of your opponent, right? You know, you don't have to start becoming some nasty, you know, left-wing revolutionary. That's not what it's about, right? It's classical civil disobedience. So you watch something about Martin Luther King, you watch something about Gandhi, right? In those situations, people were getting shot, they were getting tortured, they're getting beaten up, but they maintain non-violent discipline. And what non-violent discipline means is when you go to the opponent, you're serious, right? You don't like say to them what a cunt they are or whatever. Right?
By opponent,
You
you mean
go
the
in the
police?
room. Sorry?
By opponent, you mean the
Sorry?
police?
The police, the authorities, and the government, right? If you want to be a professional social change revolutionary, then you're going to them with the proposal, right? Which is change needs to happen. And this is something that's controversial about police. A lot of movements get, like, quite rightly, like Black Lives Matter and what have you, get quite rightly mad with the police because the police are the front line of their oppression. But in terms of political maturity, we need to understand that it's not the police, it's the corporate state that is like behind the injustice and the oppression and all the fuckery that's coming down the road. Okay? So that's why you're going beyond them, right? To the actual places of power. So that's the,
So
that's
what
the
are you
point.
telling us, if I got it right, is to not look at the police from a moral perspective, but look at it as a force in society, as a pillar of power, which could be the factor that happens during the Arab Spring, and which could like be an actor of change. Is this what you're telling us?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of rapid political change, the police and the security forces, when they start to crack, when they start to say, hang on a minute, it's not my job to start dragging kids off the street, right? Once that starts happening, then the state loses its power. So if you actively try to get the police to defect, and there's ways of doing that, right? Then there's research that shows you're 60% more likely to get structural change, if you see what I mean. So this is why non-violent discipline is essential, because as soon as violence occurs, or if it becomes substantial, then basically you're not talking about the main issue anymore, right? As soon as you block a road, all the media and the police and everyone will want to talk about protest politics, right? Protest politics aren't the issue here. But the issue is we're heading towards 5 degrees centigrade, which is 10 degrees inland, which means mass starvation for people in Italy. That's what we need to talk about, right? Not the ins and outs of sitting in the road. You see what I mean? Yeah. So when you go and talk to the police, like in London or wherever, I go and talk to the police. Like, I'm not being nice to them, right? I'm not going, hey, the police are great or anything stupid like that. What I'm going to the police and doing is, we're doing this, whether you want us to or not, right? We're going to be non-violent, and your duty is not to arrest us, right? Your duty is to say to the British state or the Italian state, it's not my job to facilitate the death of the next generation. You see what I mean? It's not my job to start arresting kids because they're shitting themselves over what's going to be happening in 20 years' time. And you don't need like loads, you know, obviously loads of the police are like crappy people, let's say, right? For the sake of argument. But a lot of the police are ordinary guys, right? They've got kids as well. You know, they don't want to be doing that. So what often happens is, you know, 100, 200, 300 police or something will decide just to not follow orders. Or, you know, if it happens in the global south, some of the soldiers, like a lot of soldiers come from working class backgrounds, right? So a lot of the soldiers in social conflicts go, hang on a minute, why am I defending this regime, right? And oppressing people like, you know, people like me, right? Ordinary people, my brothers and sisters on the street. Once that starts happening, that's when you get structural change. And the thing to understand here is it's like non-linear, right? In other words, like nothing happens and then everything happens. So you probably saw that in America, you know, for 10 days, the authorities were going with the Black Lives Matter protest. The authorities were going, yeah, you know, get off the streets, we're just going to hit you, you know, all that crap. After 10 days, suddenly they start realizing they're going to lose this and they're going to have to make concessions. So suddenly state governors start going, okay, so I'm going to bring in legislation to have proper control over the police, defund the police, right? In other words, like suddenly it gets around that corner. But it's a bit like a labor strike, you know. If you go on strike, the bosses don't go, oh, we're thinking about making concessions, right? What they say is, we're not going to do anything. We're not talking to you. We're not talking to you, not talking to you, right? And then suddenly one day out of the blue, they go, oh, we are talking to you, right? It's like that. So if
They're
you go
forced
to
to.
Rome, you force them. They change in a moment, because if they start saying to you, oh, you know, we might talk to you, then they're sort of giving in. You see what I mean? Like, people never do that. They say no, 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 and then they suddenly go yes. So that's how it works. So if you go to Rome, right, and you blockade Rome for like 6 days, maybe nothing happens. The reason why nothing happens is because you haven't done it for 12 days. You see what I mean? You see what I'm saying? So you
Mm-hmm.
just haven't got to that point. It's a bit like 200 workers going on strike, right? You need like 10,000 workers to go on strike. You see what I mean? It's not that the tactic doesn't work. It's just that you haven't done enough of it. That's,
Yeah,
that's the idea.
another big problem that we have is that politicians are not just saying, no, no, we don't want to talk with you. They are just pretending that they're acting while, of course, they are not. And like, put them the mask off from their face is even much more difficult when a person is pretending to act. And yeah, there is a comment in the chat which says that mass refusal to collaborate with school is a form of non-collaboration with the system and should not be underestimated, given the importance also of the school youth system. Yeah, there was Jenna
Yeah,
Sharp,
what,
which
with the coal industry, right?
with the school industry, there was Jenna Sharp, who is in his books was like categorizing the kind of action, and also non-collaboration was a way to fight back against the system. And the comment is saying that mass refusal to collaborate with school is should not be underestimated. It's an important way to struggle and to fight against it.
Yeah. Did you say non-cooperation with coal?
No, with school.
Oh,
With
with
the educational
school.
system. Yeah.
Oh, school. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm sure you've talked about this, but how, what Gandhi said was, one of Gandhi's big quotes was like, first of all, they ignore you, right? Then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win, right? So this
Yeah.
is, if there's one theory, basically that's all I've got to say to you guys, right? So, for 30 years, right, they totally ignored young people, right? You were sending letters and stuff, right? So when you started
Mm-hmm.
going on school strike, they sort of laugh at you. You've got their attention, but they're patronizing you, right? They invite you in to talk to, some MPs. Basically, that's not creating change, right? What's going to create the change is when you take it to the next step. So you stop going to school like 3 or 4 days a week, or you stop going to school at all, right? Because that's when they enter the fight stage, right? So what's the fight stage? The fight stage is when they come to your houses and they start dragging you out the house to take you to school, right? Or they fine your parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point at which they start to make change, right? And again, to emphasize, I'm not like pressurizing anyone to do anything, okay? All I'm saying is, if you're serious about making progress on the most important thing in your life, then this is what needs to happen. Now, it doesn't need loads of people to do it, right? It could start off with, you could go on social media and you could say, look, we need 500 people, 500 young people to not go to school for 2 weeks. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Once you've got the 500 people, then they go and do it. So this is what's called alliance of the willing, right? So instead of going, oh, you're really bad, you're trying to pressurize loads of people to do something that's really horrible. No, we're not. What we're saying is, if you don't want to do it, that's cool. But there's some people that do want to do it. So if you do want to do it, then why not, right? Why hold people back? So then you have to design, something that everyone does, and you organize the press and get the telly there and all the rest of it. And suddenly, like, you'll be on the 6 o'clock news because it's like 500 kids in Italy are going, we're not going to go to school for 2 weeks because we're over what's happening. You see what I mean? And maybe it won't work, right? Maybe you have to do it for 4 weeks, right? Or maybe you have to do it with 1,000 young people. But there's a point at which, like, it all go ballistic, if you see what I mean. There's a point
Mm-hmm.
at which you become national news. So, for instance, in the UK, like 1,200 people were arrested in the centre of London, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for the first 4 days, all the press ignored us, right? It was like, whatever, right? But on the fifth day, we were on the front pages of all the national press because it suddenly like went flip. Oh my God, these people are serious, right? And after
Mm-hmm.
10 days, we were talking to the government, right? And a week after that, the parliament declared a climate emergency. Why was that? Because 1,200 people got arrested, and that was the biggest act of civil disobedience in British history, right? So, as I said, if kids do it, if young people do it, then it might only be like 400, right? 400 young people get arrested. Maybe it's 200, maybe it's 50. The point is, it's not 100,000, right? It's perfectly within the remit of the resources of Fridays for a Future people to do this sort of stuff. And again, you know, there's no pressure. All I'm saying is that's the direction of travel in order to get this thing on the go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was looking to some comments and some questions in the chat. There was particular one comment saying two questions regarding the companies, like that don't give a fuck basically. And there was a particular question saying how like the company cannot realize that, that it's about the future of their children too. It's not just about, you know, the future of some far people. It's about their lives and their children too. And yeah, this person was asking you like how cannot they realize it, how we need like to take direct action in order to let them understand this is not possible and we have to change this.
Well, the thing to understand about direct action is one of its one of the primary reasons to do direct action is to build a movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we went and blockaded London last April, you know, when there's 1,200 arrests and about 10,000 people went or whatever, like in the following month, something like 50,000 people signed up to Extinction Rebellion, right? So why was that? It was because we had massive publicity, we were massively disruptive, and people became emotional, right? So people went, oh my God, this is real, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's all these grannies and 14-year-olds getting arrested, there's people getting dragged off here, left and center every day, like every day it was on the news. So people were going, oh my God, right? Something's happening at last, right? There's millions of people out there. There's millions of young people out there, as I'm sure you know, right? Really depressed, sitting in their bedrooms thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die soon. You know, what the hell? You know, and getting into sort of really depressive modes. If they see on Instagram or, you know, on social media, you know, 500, 1,000 young people getting arrested or whatever it is, they're going to be straight onto Instagram or straight onto social media, sharing it and going, oh my God, this is what we need to do. And then what you need to do is then organize it again, right? So don't feel like, oh my God, there's only 100 people who want to go and get arrested in Rome, right? Just go and do it. Because you're not going to get to 500 people unless that 100 people have already got arrested, you see what I mean? Or done whatever you're doing. So in other words, like it's action that creates mobilization. You don't mobilize and then go and act. You know, where Greta didn't like send round loads of letters to other young people going, I'm thinking about going on school strike, did she? She just said, you know, she got up one morning effectively and Greta said, I'm just going to go on school strike, right? She just did it. So that's what some of you need to do. You don't need to start asking permission or, you know, sending something around going, what do you think about this? You just say, I want to do this, or 10 of us want to do this, 50 of us want to do this. Do you want to join in? It's an alliance of the willing thing. Yeah. You know, we're not going to win on one iteration, one go. You go and do it. You like gather all the supporters. You have more social media meetings. You set another date and you go and do it again, right? And then you go and do it again. And each time you do it, then it builds and, you know, it spreads around different cities, just as has happened with Fridays for Future. So, you know, that's the way to do it. And incidentally, if there's a group of people in Italy who want to do it and they want to jump on a call with me, you know, this is what I specialize in, as it were, is helping people to organize, you know, civil disobedience. Then obviously, you know, there's no pressure. You don't need to get in touch with me, but you can get in touch with me through you. and, you know, we can jump on a Zoom call and I can pass, you know, on to other people, other young people who have done it. You know, there's people in America that are interested in doing this sort of stuff. And then you get on the go, right? Because you don't, you know, one of the main things is you want to learn from other people, right? It's quite complicated. It's quite scary. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. Find out what other people do. At the end of the day, it's really straightforward, isn't it? Right? It's not complicated, but like that. But anyway, so that's an offer.
Yeah, a coaching program. Cool.
Yeah.
Great, great. So, well, thank you for that. We'll take this into account. And yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so if there are no other questions, we are going toward the end. I have a special question for you because I've been reading through your papers and your documents in the Radical Think Tank at the beginning, and also about the King's College campaign which you delivered. I'm not sure if this is gonna be a good thing, like to stop like studying and being like a third party and doing it by myself, but this worked out. And yeah, how's your feeling about this after 2-3 years, about what you did, like being directly involved on it?
Yeah, well, you know, the fact of the matter is you need to decide what's most important in your life, right? Is it actually doing something about the climate crisis, or is it going to be your career, your status, you know, what people think about you, right? And obviously, like, lots of people are going to just choose to stay going over the cliff with everyone else, right? But there's people out there, and I'm sure there's people on this call, right, who know emotionally, you know, everything's fucked. Once you come to that realization, and this is a fundamental realization in civil resistance, you know, in political struggles, people come to the realization that they're going to be harmed anyway, right? You're going to be losing your jobs anyway. People are going to be starving. Italy's going to be turning to desert anyway. So what the fuck, right? I might as well go out and do what works, right? So what works is to go out and engage in civil disobedience against an institution or the government. And what I decided to do in King's College is I said to myself, it's totally unacceptable for me to participate in an institution that's investing in companies that are going to destroy the next generation, right? It's morally abhorrent. It makes me sick, basically. It made me sick that all these intelligent people were so callous and so cruel and so stupid to want to continue to invest in this mass suicide project that we face. In other words, like, I was disgusted. And that's what drove me basically to risk my PhD, right? I mean, it cost me a lot of money to do a PhD. It wasn't a light decision, right? You know, I've got responsibilities in my family, got responsibilities, you know, I haven't got much money. You know, I was having to sleep in my car in London and stuff, right? I couldn't afford accommodation, all this sort of stuff. But I said, fuck it, basically, I'm over this shit, you know? And I basically, you know, said to some students, I said, right, what we're going to do, what I'm going to do anyway, is go and spray chalk the front of King's College, right? So you can see this video, it's on social media. You know, it wasn't done very well. You know, I didn't really think about it that much. I just thought, right, I'm going to do it. So I went and put, you know, spray painted the front of this, you know, elite British institution, right? And, you know, within 2 minutes, all the security out, as you imagine. And, you know, I was in big trouble and I was going to get, you know, expelled or whatever. And then what happened was about 10 students came to me and they said, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, at last someone's doing something, you know, someone's actually doing something real. So then I said to them, look, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the central hall of King's College, you know, this big posh Gothic hall, you know, with British Empire type stuff. And we're going to cover the whole hall with spray paint. So there was 8 of us and we all went in there from opposite directions and we just covered the whole hall with paint, right? It was about £8,000 worth of criminal damage, okay? You know what happened? Like within 3 minutes, 3 or 5 minutes, the vice principal, the guy who runs the college, was on the sea talking to us. And he said to me, Roger, this sort of thing is terrible. This is outrageous. It closes down the conversation. And I said to him, this is the first time you've agreed to have a conversation, right? So it's like bang. Do you see what I mean? So this is how direct action works, right? You can write to the headmaster in your school. You can write to, you know, the vice principal of your university. You know what's going to happen? They don't give a shit. But if you go and spray chalk their walls, they will be down in 5 minutes. You can guarantee it. And they will be panicking. And that's where you want them. You want them to be panicking, right? And then the following day, I said, I'm going on hunger strike until you divest. Okay, so I didn't eat for 14 days, which, you know, I'm not telling anyone to do that, but just for the record, it doesn't kill you, okay? You know, lots of people have done it. And they were totally shitting themselves, right? The vice principal said to me, whatever it takes, basically, we want you to stop doing the hunger strike. Because they were terrified of the bad publicity. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So they had an emergency meeting, and they had 2 emergency meetings of their finance group. And within 14 days, in front of the press, they signed a piece of paper to say they would completely divest from fossil fuels, right? So in other words, in 5 weeks, we totally turned around like an elite educational institution, you know, with 29,000 students. This was a major institution. Why did it happen? Through full-on civil disobedience, right? That's how it works. So if you're serious about it, it's not like you don't know what to do. You see what I mean? You know, I mean, how long does it take to get an institution to divest from fossil fuels? You know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? But if you go and spray chalk the central hall and then you go on hunger strike, it's 5 weeks. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not, right? Maybe it's not going to work, right? I can't guarantee. But the point is this is why they desegregated Birmingham in 7 days, right? This is why the British Parliament agreed to the climate emergency. I mean, no politician in Britain was even interested. It was a bit like Italy, right? No Italian politicians talking about climate change. You know how it is? It's because, like, you haven't blockaded Rome, right? Once you've done that, they'll be talking about it. You can be sure, right? And if they're not, it's because you haven't done enough of it. So for Extinction Rebellion, it was like a case study, right? What it showed is direct action works. And just to finish off on it, like all the way through that, I was super polite to the university authorities, you see? So I wasn't going in there shouting at them and getting all aggressive. I just said, look, you know, I want this to happen and I'm not stopping eating. I'm not going to start eating again until you do it, you know? Maybe I'm going to end up in hospital, but I'm over it, right? But I was just telling them. So in other words, you let the action speak, right? You don't need to get all like, you know, aggressive and, you know, political about it. You just say, this is the situation. It's my future. It's my world. I want you to start reducing carbon emissions, and we're not going to start eating till, you know, this happens. And just in case the right-wing press are listening to this, like, I'm not telling anyone what to do. Okay? I'm just saying, if you do this, then that's likely to happen. You have to make your own decisions, right? It's not for me to say whether you should go on hunger strike or not, just to be clear. Yeah.
Did you feel like kind of civic duty towards, you know, we have a social contract and that the state is supposed to protect us. Once they don't do it, then do you feel like you have a civic duty to take action to like reestablish the fundamental principles of our society?
Yeah, this is a fundamental political point, right? You know, lots of people, I presume from your generation, you sort of brought up with the idea the government's always right. You have to do what the government does. The government's in charge, and it will always be in charge, right? That's not the case, right? In Western Europe, in the European tradition, in the Republican tradition, the state, a government, has limited power. It only has the legitimacy to the extent that it protects the people from harm, right? So in political theory, this is like the first duty of the state. The first duty of a regime is to protect people from dying or being killed. That's the traditional thing. And in the English tradition, you know, which goes back to the English Civil War, what the English like decided, as you may know, is in the 1700s, they said, no, 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 like the state doesn't have an absolute control over us, right? The state has a contract. In other words, the state has to fulfill certain obligations in order for us to obey the state. If the state becomes a tyranny, if the state engages in activities that is going to kill the people have a right and a duty to rebel. So that's fundamental to our political traditions. And, you know, it goes back to, dare I say, to Italy, right? To the Renaissance, to the city-states in the Renaissance, where they got rid of tyrants and what have you. And it goes back to Republican Rome, where they were saying, no, 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 we're not going to have, you know, an emperor with absolute powers, because we know where that leads, right? It leads to tyranny and everything that's terrible about tyranny. So the point I'm making in the book, and, you know, you might think this is like a weird point, but my argument is the world's governments constitute a tyranny. Because what a definition of a tyranny is a regime that plans the death of its citizens. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you have an absolute right to rebel against the Italian government to the extent that it consciously and willingly engages in a plan to destroy your generation.
Yeah,
So go and tell them that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So regarding the Italian situation, which you have just mentioned, don't you feel like that, that the actions should be planned and prefigured, thinking about the context, the political and cultural context in which they happen? And it's kind of important also to demystify something just because it's done somewhere else, just worked, and it's important to take it, to understand like general patterns and put it into perspective related to the culture and political context before doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know what it's like to be in Italian culture. You know the trigger points, you know, like the memes, you know the jokes, you know the history, blah, 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 you know, all this stuff. Like you know, I'm not even going to start to advise you on anything like that. But the point is when you go and do protest, obviously it's got a physical aspect to it, right? You're physically blocking the road or whatever, or you're refusing to go to school. But when you do your press releases, you know, when you do music, when you do theatre, when you talk on the street, when you do interviews, you know, how you dress up, what you do in the streets, whether you're going to have a dance or whatever, like all that needs to be connected with your culture, right? And that's what gives that connection, right? So it's not just physically blocking the streets, it's making that emotional connection, right? These are the kids of Italy doing things that basically make us emotional, right? You know, whatever that is. And, you know, who knows what that might be. But yeah, that's a big side of it. And, you know, it's really important to go and have some fun, right? When you go and watch the children's march, you can see like the kids are just going, we're over this shit, right? We're just going to have our own time. You know, the world belongs to us. The future is ours. You know, it's not my generation, so I'll be dead soon. You know, I mean, with you guys, it's like you've got 50, 60, 70 years, right, still on the planet. So it belongs to you, and you need to go and tell the next generation to go and fuck off, basically, right? You're the show. You know, you have a right to decide what's happening because it's going to be your world. And you need to do that, right? You need to say that in a really vigorous, sweary sort of way, not in a polite middle-class way. I mean, I think that's why the Italian publishers called it "Otherwise We're Fucked," right? Because I think in Italy, you're quite good at actually, you know, just saying things as they are, right? It's part of your political tradition. So maybe you can lead the world on that a little bit. Who knows? Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So I think we can conclude with this inspiring thought. And yeah, I want to thank you again for being here with us and sharing these thoughts. And I strongly recommend to those who didn't do it yet to have a look at the book. It's published in Italy by the name of Otherwise We Are Fucked, altrimenti siamo fottuti. Yeah, so thank you so much, Roger.
Yeah. And thanks very much for everyone that's watching it. Just to emphasize, this is just my It's just my personal view, okay? So I'm not talking on behalf of Extinction Rebellion. I always talk on behalf of myself. So, you know, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, then basically that's my view. And, you know, my main message to people is don't read the book, okay? I mean, read the book if you want to, but the main message is, like, I'm not on this call to promote my book, right? Read it if you want to, that's cool. The most important thing is get off this call, get in touch with other young people, and start planning civil disobedience, right? And then get in touch with me if you want to, if you want some, you know, and I can give you a whole load of links to people that are cool about it.
Cool.
You know, it's action that counts, right? Not just reading books.
Yeah.
And thank you very much.
Great, great. Thank you. Bye to everybody who's watching
See
that.
you in a bit. See ya.
See you in the streets.
Yeah.